Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now the other day one of you guys asked me if I could build a PC where every component was the same price. Now this was going to be quite challenging, but there was no specific budget. In this case I've chosen to try and put a whole PC together for less than £1 or under $1.50 per component. This was a little bit more tricky because I opted to buy all the components individually. But luckily, there were a few people near me who really were able to help out in this case. So let's get into it and talk about what I've put together. It's pretty terrible, but let's go. So I found this new website called Spock. Sounds like Sean Connery naming his favourite Star Trek character. But it's like a local boot selling app where people can list items that they don't want. Sort of like eBay and Gumtree. I found a used motherboard here from an Acer or small PC dismantler. Basically what this person does, or this company does, is take apart old small form factor systems and sells off the parts individually, so that may be a good place to start. So I have the motherboard in my possession, but it's not your traditional looking system board. Instead I've opted for this. Now this was pulled out of an old Acer system, an L3600 or L6300. It came with the heatsink with no fan, the backplate for the heatsink, and it doesn't support traditional DDR2 memory rather than it does mobile DIMMs. So this may be quite interesting. As you can see, it's got no PCIe slot for a graphics card either, but I got it for £1. It was actually up for sale for £5, but I put to use my excellent haggling skills and basically just said what I was doing, the project I was working on, and they were happy to let it go for just £1. I got a few other bits while I was there as well. This bag of accessories which cost 20p. What this contains is the fans, which you can connect to the heatsink, as well as a couple of SATA cables here. So with this motherboard we also have Wi-Fi here, although we probably won't be able to use it because it connects up to the Acer case. We do have the traditional ports here though, so you could add a USB Wi-Fi dongle should you choose to in this scenario. And there is no PCI Express 16 slot on here, so we won't be able to add a graphics card to our super cheap build, but it will definitely be fun trying to play a few games with what I can only presume are integrated GMA graphics. So along with my motherboard, I bought a power brick in the same store, which I was told would be needed in order to power the Acer motherboard, because of course it is an OEM board, a socket 7751. This cost an additional £1 as well, which the person was kind enough to throw in for such a great price. And because there are local boot sales near me, I picked up this 250 gig Seagate drive just a week ago for 80p. Makes a bit of a funny noise, but it should last long enough to test this system out. So by this point all we needed was a CPU and of course some memory. According to Crucial, DDR2 667MHz is supported, and luckily over on CEX they do have some for a very little amount. In this case it comes in at just 25p per module, so I bought two for a grand total of 50p. As for the CPU, well, I went with the Core 2 Duo E4500, clocked at 2.2 GHz. Again, probably could have gone with something a little more powerful, but for 50p, I can't really complain. So let's put it all together and see how it performs. If anything, it can be easier to install mobile memory than it can desktop memory, because with desktop memory you have to wait for that click. It feels like you're breaking something sometimes if you haven't done it before. But with this stuff, it just slides right in and pops down like so. So I've already taken the heatsink off, as you can see, but it's time to insert our E4500 Core 2 Duo into the build. This is always very simple, and it just goes in, pull this little hammer down. Now this will feel like you're breaking it. If you've never done it before, you may hear a slight crunch, but once it's done we can apply our thermal paste. I like to use this Noctua stuff, NTH1. I think it's the best stuff. I've always used it and it's never let me down. It keeps temperatures nice and cool. And it's as if by magic that the heatsink is now applied. I'm going to use this table as our open air test bench. Now there's actually no fans for this, but we do have these little ones here. So what we can do for this case is just sit them here like so. They actually sort of clip in, which is quite handy. against this heatsink, so they can sit there, and then we can plug them in, and that will work effectively at keeping the CPU cool. So now it's time to connect our SATA hard drive here, grabbing this unconventional cable. This just plugs in like any regular SATA at this end. As hard as this is to do in front of a camera, let me just go ahead and plug that in for you like so. We can then connect the other end to this 5-pin socket located just here. Almost forgot, we've got to connect our normal SATA cable here as well, the cable that actually allows the data to be transferred from the hard drive to the motherboard. This is just as simple as connecting the power cable once you have found the actual slot on this board. But once we're done, we are now ready to turn our system on. But there's a small problem. How do we turn a system on with no power button? Sure, we've got this unconventional power brick here, but there's no power button. Well, let's figure that out right now. So normally I'd use this, which is my little power connector. I connect to other desktops when I haven't got a power button, but this won't fit any port on here. But looking at a manual on Acer's website, this is where the front panel connectors would connect, and judging by the power layout, pin 3 and 4 on the top row are the ones where the power switch would connect to. So I think that by shorting these with a flathead screwdriver, we should be able to get power to our system. Okay, so before I turn this on, I'd like to say that I'm pretty happy with the cable management. This is probably neater than most of the PCs I've built, because we're actually running things just under the table here. If you can see under there, there's the power brick along with a few shoes. We'll be installing Windows 10 on that. That won't cost anything because I'll use it as a trial version. Let's get into it. So just look at that, guys. The fans are spinning. It's a completely silent PC as well, which is nice. And we have booted up into the BIOS here. Just look at how cool the CPU is. I'm actually quite surprised, considering that the fans are consisted of two little tiny things like that are just propped up against the heatsink. But it's time to install Windows 10 on our open air desktop now. Everything for £1 or less than $1.50 PC working title, because it's not very catchy, and see just how well it performs. So as you can see, we've installed Windows 10 here. Let me just jump into Device Manager. Display adapters are Intel GMA graphics, and for the processor we have the E4500 showing up just fine there. Let me zoom in a little for you guys. So let's get to testing this thing and see how powerful our everything for less than £1 or $1.50 in components PC does. If you like beastie Cinebench scores, then prepare your eyes for this multi-core result. When it was done, the CPU finished with a multi-core score of 103. So as for gaming, we'll start off with the original Far Cry here at 800 by 600 with the absolute minimum settings. So the game is definitely playable. I'll tell you that. It doesn't really drop so far in frames that it becomes stuttering unplayable. I'm having a pretty decent time. As you can tell, the game doesn't look the best, but then again, it doesn't by today's standards anyway, and I think it's definitely more about having fun and experimenting with what you can play on old systems such as this one. So another old game that ran very well was Morrowind. I really enjoy this game, and to know it runs on GMA graphics is very good, because if you have an old PC like this one, then you should be able to play it no problem, even though you'll have to turn down the resolution and the settings all the way down as well. So last but not least, it's Portal, another older game which will run fine on GMA graphics. I'd estimate that most games from 2005 or before will run fine on a system like this one. You're looking at games like GTA, the old ones, 3, Vice City, San Andreas, things like that. San Andreas might struggle a little bit more, but the older Call of Duty games, as well as Half-Life 2, basically any older titles will run fine on a system like this one that includes an old Core 2 Duo processor. So guys, there we have it. I hope you've enjoyed this super cheap budget build, and it's been very interesting to see just what it could do today. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, leave a dislike if you didn't. Let me know the cheapest PC that you've ever put together, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.